Go live on the stream. Turn off the preview because it's distracting, and we're good to go. It's Monday, April 18th, 2022. I'm Rim.
I'm Scott.
And this is Geek Nights. Tonight we are talking about video cables. Oh, I got an opening bit. So, got real warm. Got, like, 70s warm. And I did a bunch of biking.
For like about 5 hours.
Couple days. It was like upper 60s that second day. So, I've learned that in the era of climate change, even like in New York City, the forecast for the next day will be radically different by the time that next day comes. So, anyway, I got a whole ton of biking in. It was a fantastic weekend. I get up this morning thinking, maybe I'll bike to work. It's like 40 degrees. Cool. I still bikes, but it was not as pleasant as, say, biking over the new Brooklyn Bridge bike path, which I did for the first time with Emily over the weekend. It's I'd never been over it before.
It's a path.
Yeah, completely separate. Biking on that was interesting because I saw that the pedestrian/tourist part of it was completely packed with people who couldn't even walk. It was so crowded. And there was like 2 or 3 other bikers on the bike path. Everyone was just flying. It was a good time. But it's going to be cold, I think, for the rest of this week. But
it's annoying. It's like we're going to have climate change, right? At least just give me the one upside, which is it's supposed to be warmer, right?
Yep. See, no, it's not. The problem is it's going to be warmer, but it's also going to be more variable. So our winters will be colder and worse. Our summers will be hotter, but also worse. It's going to swing a lot more. It's going to be less predictable.
No such thing as hotter and worse. Hotter is better.
Until you hit that wet bulb temperature and the human body just literally dies.
I mean, if I literally die, you know, at least I'll die warm.
But in more exciting news, if you haven't noticed, the price of video cards is slowly but surely approaching reasonable prices again for a bunch of reasons.
It's gone down a little bit.
It's actually gone down a lot.
Actually, I heard the prices are actually not bad in the UK. I saw.
Oh, they're not bad in the US. So I looked again. I actually bought now. We bought a 3080 Ti titanium, the fancy one. The big thing I noticed was the biggest price discrepancy is still the 3080 because if you look at MSRP, the GTX 3080 is the absolute sweet spot of dollar for performance, like bar none.
What's the MSRP? $700?
No, I got to look it up again. It's shockingly low. Let's see, MSRP 3080. I'll even share my browser so the stream guy can see. $700.
That's what I just said.
Yep. So $700 is a fantastic price for a 3080, but the actual price, even if you buy it direct from a store, is about double that or more because they're in so much demand.
Depends where you get it, but I've seen them for like $1,000, $1,100.
Give or take, but very rarely, and usually those require being in a weird line, being in a lottery, all sorts of nonsense. And meanwhile, if you go up to the 3080 Ti or the 3090, the MSRP is higher. And the performance per dollar, like there's diminishing returns, obviously. But if you buy these cards right now, the price that you actually pay from a non-scalper, the difference in price between MSRP and the overcharge from lack of supply is way lower. You're paying way closer to MSRP, but you're still paying it above. So I ended up getting a 3080 Ti that cost about the same as what a 3080 is going for right now. And put in Emily's computer with the i9. And that thing, it is huge. It is absolutely huge, which is terrifying to me because it is still significantly smaller than a 3090.
Yeah, that's, I mean, that's the thing is that, people keep comparing, right, the Apple computers to, right, PCs, as they should, right? But
a PC is a yo-dog that has another PC.
Even if I buy a PC and I pay the overcharge for the 3080, 3090, whatever, right? And it's like, you're going to beat the Apple computer, right? Even that new Mac Studio, you're going to beat it. It's going to be faster, right? But what you're not taking into account is, I think I've said this on the show probably a million times, is it's basically using ridiculous amounts of power and generating ridiculous amounts of heat. It's like it's not efficient whatsoever. Right?
Well, case in point, so the price difference between MSRP and actual price right now for the 3090 is approaching actual MSRP. And I thought about buying a 3090 because of that. But when I looked at it, so Emily's computer has an i9. It's a super powerful computer.
The i9 is also sort of, in that nonsense zone.
Well, what Emily does is kind
of diminishing returns.
It is,
right?
But for what Emily does, it actually does make a significant difference. Like, you think I need a powerful computer?
I don't know if there would really be a significant difference.
There absolutely is.
And i7 and an i9.
So an i9 with a 3090, the recommendation is the minimum PSU is an 850 watt, the absolute minimum. And a lot of people report significant instability, which I think is because people buy cheap PSUs that say 850, but are a little bit dodgy if you're pushing them that hard. So
overheating probably also.
Yeah. So, but also the 30, like generally the 60 is like the normal card for normal gamers. The 70 is a weird card usually that's faster, but maybe like I can't imagine anyone who actually needs it. The 80 is like the sweet spot. The 80 Ti is usually the one a professional would get because it's sometimes even has a slower clock, but it'll have like more cores or more RAM. It'll run cooler, use less power per performance.
It gets using less power.
Less power per performance.
I don't think usually the differences between that's what the other thing that surprises me, right? Is that the marketing difference, right? Is like, oh yes, this 3070, 3080, right? It's like Megato, Megatime,
right?
Mega2, right? But it's like the actual difference between them is so scant, right? It's like, the 99% of the time, would you ever notice the difference between the 3080 and the 3090? No, there would be no perceptible difference between them. Other than
if you're making games, working in Unity, working in Maya, working in like ZBrush and all these other tools, the thing the 3090 has, the two things it has that don't apply to anyone who's playing games. These only apply to professionals. Like a 3090 is worthless for gaming. Even an Index VR can run at absolute max specs on a regular ass 3080. So the 3090 has double the video RAM and way more CUDA cores.
But would you?
Yeah, the double video RAM will absolutely be used if you're working. For making games?
How much time is it real world time is it actually saving when you push the render button versus the cheaper
this isn't a render. This is like real time editing, and what happens is if you don't have enough RAM, like video RAM, then
but isn't half as much still enough?
Nope.
Right?
It is absolutely not. Like some of these applications, remember, they're not great. Remember how Adobe products used to be, like
then
the CS4 era?
These applications, what computers did they use to make them? If right? It's
yeah.
If the majority of your customers do not have,
no, they all have video cards like this.
Right.
Well, actually, a big problem in the video game industry last year was that people needed these new cards and literally couldn't get them.
Well, that's what I understand. Is like if you're making software, right? It's like, okay, you can't make software that demands, some rare piece of hardware equipment that none of your customers have. You have to make your software run on the average hardware that most of your customers are going to be using.
But your customers are professionals.
Then obviously that level is going to be much higher.
Yeah.
Right? But you can't be like, oh, we know that the 3080 has 12 gigabytes of video RAM or something, right? And the 3090 has 24.
Yeah.
It's like a 3080 has to be enough to run your software. You can't be writing software that's like, actually, no, you need the 24. We're going to make you get the 3090 or our software is going to run poorly.
Well, it depends.
Really that's really bad on the side of whoever's making the program.
I mean, you say that, but that's like, for example, monitoring software in capital markets takes about 4 times the performance of the software actually doing the trading.
It's poorly written software.
No, that's the problem's actually more complex. It's way more work to make the thing than the final rendered in-game real-time version of it is. Nobody needs these cards to play.
That's true, but the point is that you know, you have to consider, no matter what software it is, you have to consider what the customer is, you know, who's running the software is going to have.
Yeah.
Right. You can't set your system requirement too high if you want customers.
Well, the thing is, these requirements are pretty reasonable for VR development, and the only problem is we've had this weird video card crush because of cryptocurrency.
Well, there's also it's just like what I was saying before. You know, these video cards is basically, you know, it's like a hot rod, right? It's a ridiculous car.
Oh, I was reading reviews because, you know, I decided against the 3090 for all the reasons we both talked about. But the best review I saw was, this thing is a toaster oven that you put in your computer and turn on and never turn off.
Right. It's like, oh, you want to make your car faster, right? It's like, well, you know, you could cleverly engineer it and come up with better new radical designs that are more efficient and whatnot, right? Which is the Apple way. Or just take the old shitty design we've always had and just more power, more heat sinks, right? Just like duct tape something on there, you know, put some fans on it.
Do you know, Scott, do you know on fighter jets, you know, you hear the term afterburner, like,
that's what that is, yeah.
Yeah, do you know how they actually work? It's even more ridiculous than you probably think.
Don't they just ignite the exhaust fumes to make more?
Nope,
thrust?
It's even worse than that. They basically spray fuel past the original jet to cause a further set of fire and explosions among the exhaust. They're spraying fuel. In F-16, I went to Starbase, like this program that was obviously, in retrospect, trying to get kids to join the Air Force and indoctrinate them. But an F-16 can run its afterburner for like 7 minutes, and then the whole plane's out of fuel and has to go land.
Well, usually you have in-air refueling, right?
Oh, yeah. But 6 or 7 minutes of burning that thing because you're literally just spraying fuel out the back.
Yeah, that's what an NVIDIA 3080, 3090 is, right? It's,
yep.
You know.
But
so it's like, you know, as fast as it is, right? And it's, you know, it's like, I'll probably get a new video card, you know, 5080 something, right?
Yep.
6080, something like that.
Oh, there's a reason this 3080 Ti is in Emily's computer because she needs it for work.
Yeah.
I can play Overwatch just fine with my 1080, so I'm going to wait until either a 3080 is MSRP or a 4080 comes out, or honestly, I can't upgrade this computer to Windows 11 because it's the CPU is too old. So in 2025, I might just build a brand new workstation.
I mean, my 1070 runs both monitors at 4K, and any game I've ever played and any Adobe app I've ever used and any program I've ever tried to write, I've never had any slowness of any kind anywhere.
The only thing I can't do
settings or anything. With
I can't do with the
the
1080. I can't do index VR in full settings.
I don't do that.
Well, I do, and also I can't live stream myself doing VR while doing VR.
All right, well, that's, you know, this goes back to my other point I keep making, which is like, yeah, VR is not for the people yet if it requires some kind of ludicrous machine to do it.
But that's not consumer VR. That's the weird edge case VR. Most VR is computerless.
Anyway.
So in some fantastic news, I haven't actually read the full court ruling yet because it's recent. It's actually from today. There was a case a while ago that I think we even talked about on Geek Nights.
Well, there have been several cases. I think this is the latest in a short line of them.
Well, this was the LinkedIn one. Seems to be the one that caused this ruling in the Ninth Circuit Court. So,
my favorite one.
Yeah. The Ninth Circuit Court, if you're not a USian, is basically like the one court district in our complicated legal system.
California.
Yeah. That almost always makes the right decision. Compared to most of the other districts in the U.S. Like, if there's ever a really good court decision in the U.S., it almost definitely came through that circuit court for reasons related to how fucked up America is. But anyway, all these cases, but this one in particular, boiled down to one fundamental question. Can you take data that is visible on someone else's website and download it? That's actually what these cases are about, which... If it sounds stupid because I'm looking at a web page, meaning I have definitely already downloaded this. In fact, I'm live streaming the web page that I downloaded to you right now on YouTube. So why would that possibly be illegal? Well, lots of people have tried to make that illegal over the years.
Yeah, I mean, you know, because people don't understand, right? Like, you know, that two things look different, but they're not actually any different, right?
Yep.
It's like, oh, you view sourced and you hacked our website. There was that situation.
Yep.
Right?
This is web scraping. What if
So it's like, okay, you let me download a web page. All right. So I make a web page. I make a program that just downloads lots of web pages over and over again. It's like, it's all I'm doing is visiting web pages real fast. It's not any different than visiting it in my browser. It's not doing anything different. It's just doing it a lot and doing it fast. It's like, is it legal for me to go and go into a store and buy something? Yeah. All right. Well, I'll go into the store and buy something and check out 1,000,000 times really fast. It's like, is that illegal? I guess not.
Well, that's the old argument with Google Maps when they added Street View. First, it was, all right, is it illegal to walk down a sidewalk and look at someone else's house? Like, just look at it from the sidewalk. Absolutely not. That's perfectly legal. Is it legal for me to take a picture of that house? Perfectly legal. Is it legal for me to share that picture with other people? Also legal. So Google said, all right, we'll do that to every single house in America.
Right.
Now what?
You just do it. Computers allow doing things that individually, right, are perfectly legal. Whether those individual things should be legal is another question that's not important right now, right? And then they allow you to do those things at scale, which does create some sort of meaningful difference on the impact of that, particular activity, right? The court shouldn't be saying, well, doing a legal activity many times really fast should not turn it into an illegal activity, right? And so therefore web scraping should be legal, and it is. And the court confirmed that. And
the court basically, I'm summarizing and paraphrasing and oversimplifying because we're not lawyers and this is not legal advice. You can read these articles. They link to the rulings. But what it came down to was the case was around a company mass scraping data out of people's LinkedIn profiles. And
those are public LinkedIn profiles. They weren't accessing, so they weren't hacking into LinkedIn or getting secret info.
Yep. And LinkedIn said, that's against our terms of service. And the court basically said, so what? Your terms of service are your terms of service. You're welcome to block them. You're welcome to make that information behind some sort of paywall or gateway. You're welcome to throttle your website. But if you can see it, you can scrape it. And
now what they might do with the scraped information, right, might cause a problem, right? So, for example, there might be a website that has some sports statistics, right?
Yep.
And I pay for access to get those statistics because I'm going to be doing some sports broadcasting.
Yep.
Right. So I pay for the Elias Sports Bureau, right? I pay for the account there, and I paid for this service. I'm legally allowed to see all this data.
But you're also legally bound with an asterisk because TOS are their own can of worms we're not going to get into. You're bound by the terms of service of that contract.
Right. So I go and I scrape all the data, and now I have it. Okay, I was legally allowed to see the data with my eyes and access it with my computer because I paid for it. No problems. But now I go ahead and I open up Scott Sports Bureau. Okay, now I'm in trouble, right? Now that I can't do.
That is a huge part of my day job industry is the world of...
It on my computer or use it for my own purposes within the license that I'm, use it for my broadcast or whatever. Nothing wrong with that.
But what you just said, use it, you licensed this data.
It up on Pirate Bay to forever other people to download it. Oh, now I'm in trouble.
Right? But that's it. You licensed this data, meaning you signed some sort of contract with this company to get the data. LinkedIn, I can go to LinkedIn's website from an incognito browser in a library.
Yep.
I didn't sign shit.
You could just make any old LinkedIn account and start browsing around and looking at people's resumes and shit.
So this was appealed, and now the decision, this was the second pass at this, they went further. They relied on some old Supreme Court thing, and they basically said the only time any of this is applicable is if the access to the data was clearly unauthorized and was accessed via illegal means. And I'm going to quote the article because it says it best. Quote, using a gate up, gate down analogy, the Supreme Court said that when a computer or website's gates are up, and therefore information is publicly accessible, no authorization is required, period.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's the exact right call. As a technologist, they got it right.
Yeah. Meanwhile, they went, Aaron Shorts killed himself, right? Because they went after him for trying to download all those journal articles.
Oh, do you know how many people's lives, especially teenagers in the 90s who accessed government websites and then got, like, literally the FBI would go after them for violating laws that were poorly written or didn't even exist? This is not a new problem, and people's lives have been ruined. But at least we know for sure scraping websites is perfectly legal, so scrape on.
But, what you do with that scrape data, that's questionable.
Yeah, if I scrape location data and use that to make a hitman database and put hits on people, there's laws I'm breaking.
Yeah.
So, in some other news, a very bad man has tried to buy the very bad company. Elon Musk keeps trying to buy Twitter, and he seems to have
tried to buy it once, then he gave up.
He seems to have. It's not clear if he gave up or if he fucked it up so badly that now he can't buy it, because Twitter.
If you want the full details, you're going to read them online, but here's the vague outline, right? Step one, right, is he was unhappy with Twitter, right? Because he's one of those, wackadoodles.
Well, there's a buried lead there.
Who hasn't read the XKCD comic about what free speech means, right?
Even worse. So I found a totally separate article. I'm not gonna use it for news today. It's too much. But it was an analysis of tweets that speak favorably about Tesla vehicles. And it found that a huge percentage of all tweets about Tesla vehicles that are positive come from a very small number of accounts, and a large percentage of them appear to be bots. So,
but anyway, the point is that he's had a long history of getting in trouble for tweeting things and the SEC getting mad at him.
Yep.
Right?
He's also been periodically mad about people making fun of him on Twitter.
Well, anyway, so he's got enough money, he could just do whatever he wants, right? Because that's how this world works right now, and it's not good. So anyway, he's like, and the stock price of Twitter is low because it doesn't make any money. So he's like, you know what? I'll just buy this fucking thing, right? So he bought a large percentage of it, so I think he's now the largest single shareholder. Although it's like, what, 8 or 9%, something like that? Some percentage, right? I don't know. Maybe it was 6, whatever. Some number, but a significant amount. And then that number was supposed to get him a board seat, right? If you have that much shares in a company, you can basically vote yourself into a board seat, right? Immediately.
Yep. Not to get into the nuances of boards, but anyway, close enough.
Yeah, so he was going to get a board seat, but then he didn't, because there was something about there were some rumors swirling. All we
know is he no longer sought the board seat. No one's gave an official reason why.
About like a background check or something. Who knows if that's true or not? But
he did not. We know he did not submit to the background check that was required by Twitter. Right. That's all we know.
Anyway, the board seat thing didn't happen. So now he went for plan B or C or whatever plan it was, plan X. And he's like, you know what? I'll offer $50-something a share, right? And I'll offer that as a hostile takeover. So anyone who wants to sell me your Twitter shares, I'll pay way over what they're actually worth.
Yep.
Which is still a number he could at least by his net worth could afford.
Yep. Though there are multiple articles talking about how at the time that he made this supposed offer, he did not actually have liquid assets arranged to be able to execute it.
Right. He would have had to secure financing or sell stocks in Tesla or something like that in order to get the money to buy the shares if he
stating this publicly without having that lined up edges potentially into malfeasance, but
I'm sure the SEC is looking into it.
The SEC has already issued some statements about all this. It's real funny.
Right. So anyway, so he says he's going to, so if people had said, if the people who already had Twitter shares had said, okay, I'll just cash out and take a bunch of money, Twitter's going nowhere, he would have, ended up owning at least 51% of Twitter, and then been able to turn it into a private company again and do whatever he wants. But that didn't happen because the board of Twitter was like, you know what? We don't want that to happen. We don't like you, even though you're our largest single shareholder. We're going to do some shenanigans.
They put a poison pill, my favorite thing.
That's right. So the poison pill is basically like a magical escape hatch, right? Where it's like they change the bylaws of Twitter itself, right? Because they're the board, they vote on those things.
Like I'll give you a common example. Say I had a little company, and I might sell it to someone. We might, in our incorporating documents or bylaws or whatever, make a rule that says if the company is sold, then anyone who works at the company as of the date of the sale cannot be fired for 10 years. That's an example, a facile example of a poison pill.
Right. So I believe I'm not 100% sure what this one says, but it says something along the lines of, if this dude tries to come and buy us, then everyone who's already got shares can buy up a bunch of shares, right?
Yep.
In advance to sort of block him out.
Okay, so I found Matt Levine tweeted, Twitter's poison pill is, I'm quoting, I haven't even read this yet, an exercise price of $210, allowing each shareholder to pay $210 to acquire stock, having a then current market value of twice the exercise. God damn it. This is complicated. They basically made it to where if he tries to buy them out, the people who are already on the board and existing shareholders can unbuy it out.
Yeah. They could just acquire a bunch of shares.
The more I'm reading, it's it's too complicated to summarize. I got to read a deeper article.
They can block him out, basically.
Yeah.
That's all you need to know.
He
right?
could get around this, possibly, but
With
not
more
likely.
money. Right, with more money. But, anyway. So he's not been able to buy Twitter. Twitter is still...
Yep. To Twitter's board's credit, because Twitter has made a series of terrible decisions over the years, but at the same time, letting this particular human being own Twitter and direct it and make it private would possibly be the worst possible outcome for Twitter.
It would just be a Tumblr situation. It would just die. Right?
Yep.
Anyway, so the final news is that Jack, the previous Twitter CEO, who's not there anymore, I think he's on the board but might leave the board soon or something. I don't know what his deal is now. Who cares about that jerk? Anyway.
Yeah.
But he was like, yeah, the Twitter board is dysfunctional, something, right? So he, and basically his complaint, which is somewhat valid, depending on your perspective, right? From the perspective of someone who is, got a capitalist motivation, it's like, wow, if you own Twitter shares that aren't worth very much, you want to accept that offer and cash out for 50-something bucks a share, and you'll make a ton of money, right? That's, the fact that the board turned that down is like not in the interest of purely capitalist shareholders. And his criticism was that, hey, those board members of Twitter, they don't actually own that many shares themselves.
Yep.
Right?
There's a screenshot here where someone showed that the top 12 owners of stock. There's a great quote here. I'm not sure he's prepared to take on a couple PhDs, a few MBAs, and a baroness who use Twitter once a year and collectively own 77 shares of the company.
Yep. I mean, the people who do own the shares voted those people onto the board.
Yep.
But those people on the board don't own that many shares themselves, so they don't give a crap if it's turning that down doesn't hurt them.
Nope.
Right? Very much at all. So it's kind of a good thing in one way for Twitter to have people in charge of it who don't have a capitalist interest, but it's also not a good thing.
Well, because they are ultimately beholden to their fiduciary duty to the actual shareholders.
Right. But it's also not a good thing because technically they're supposed to be capitalist or whatever, right?
Yeah.
Theoretically. But anyway, so that's what happened there. Personally, I'm just using Twitter less and less all the time.
It's funny. I actually use Twitter a lot, and there's specific people I talk to a lot on Twitter because I just don't have any other good way to talk to those specific people. But if I
really need to talk to someone, and if I were to stop using Twitter altogether, and I really needed to talk to someone who was only on Twitter, I'm sure I could talk to them, no problem.
Yeah, no, it's more that I have semi-public conversations with this group of people on Twitter who really don't have a good forum to do that otherwise. But like you,
Tumblr died. Those people went somewhere. MySpace died. Those people went somewhere. Facebook dies. People went somewhere, right? It's like
there isn't really anywhere for that kind of conversation though, because Mastodon sucks.
I mean, something will arise. People will go somewhere, right?
My main use of Twitter
dies.
is as a publishing mechanism. And that as long as the audience is there, I will continue to publish stuff to Twitter pretty much no matter what.
Audience there.
I got a few thousand followers.
Yeah, I'm just saying, but how many of those followers are actually people who log in and read your tweet right? It's
I mean, my biggest platform is one, Libsyn, and two, YouTube.
But yeah, so that's a full drama that played out there. More and more, I just see myself, retreating from the public, social networky places.
Oh, the semi-private curated places are the place to be and always have been. The private G chats, the Discords, the GeekNights forum could see a renaissance.
I don't know, maybe. But I'm just using those places as sort of, a broad, like you said, a broadcast mechanism, right? Like I uploaded a YouTube video. Okay,
Yep.
I guess I'll tweet about it and post about it here and post about it there. So that, because other people, I'm not here to decide what other people should use as their platform of choice, right? People have their reasons for staying on Facebook or using Instagram or whatever. So it's like, okay, I'll meet you where you are. If I want to share something I made or thought so badly, right, then I should go to where you are to tell you about it.
Yep, my philosophy is put my stuff everywhere. That's why GeekNights is uploaded to like 4 different websites.
All these platforms, as long as they exist, I'll go to them and I'll post on them, to announce whatever. But it's like, in terms of having a conversation or communications or...
Oh, I don't have conversations on Twitter other than with my friends. Like, I post something, and if people want to discuss it, I tend to just block all those people.
I don't need to use any of those sites for that, even though I might from time to time, right? It's like, I'll just bring all that stuff, back to whatever, right? Even if I have to go back to IRC or who knows what dark recess of the internet I have to go to.
Now, if I want to see people talking about my work, they're coming to my own forum, my own Discord, and I'm not really looking anywhere else.
Anyway, but even if Discord goes away, it's like, I'm okay with that. So
we could replace Discord.
When I see stories about the collapse of website, platform sites.
Yeah, I guess what I find interesting is that
The world would
Twitter,
be better if they all died.
Twitter, unlike all other social media platforms, it happens to do a fairly unique thing, and everyone who's tried to make a clone of it or take its ideas and do something similar have failed. And I think it's mostly because of the critical mass of people who are on Twitter. Facebook had a long hemorrhaging of people, but Twitter seems to maintain its audience in a way that other platforms haven't because nothing really competes
Twitter
with
doesn't
it.
have the largest audience in terms of number of people who are active all the time, but I think what keeps Twitter specifically afloat is its connection to news and journalism.
A lot of people read Twitter without using, like my mom.
Right.
She follows me on Twitter. Only recently as she started really engaging with people on Twitter. For most of the time she was on Twitter, she just read it like a news site.
Right, but it's not just reading it as a news site, but also you go to, right? It's like, a news site, you watch a TV news will report on so-and-so tweeted this.
Yep.
Right? And that will be, but you don't see news, so-and-so Facebook posted that. Why? Because Facebook posts aren't some public linkable thing.
Exactly.
So... that's how that works.
Yep. All right, let me put a marker.
And journalists also go on Twitter and find out the news the same way that we will and then report on it, as a secondary.
So I can say one interesting fact. This, for the first time ever, Twitter, when the Ukraine war actually happened, when it actually started, Twitter told me it was happening before FARC did. I have never had FARC not be the first way I found out about fucking anything in my life before.
Twitter's been the fastest for a long time now.
Yep. Though FARC had way more information than Twitter, way faster. But
you gotta, it's harder to put the information together on Twitter.
It is.
FARC's just more organized.
Yep. FARC's still hanging on. I still pay for FARC. FARC's gonna someday. I think FARC will. I've paid for FARC for a long time. FARC's great.
All right.
So anyway, put a little marker here. Things of the day. So check this out. Oops. Really tiny little thing. This is almost environmental storytelling. My thing of the day is just a tweet that was making the rounds. See, my thing of the day, a tweet. This is how deeply infested we are with Twitter. But this tweet was an image, and all it said was new at the local game shop from a verified account. A lot of people retweeting it, lots of conversations, multiple Reddit threads about this image. The image was an opened and defaced copy of a Super Nintendo game called Demon's Crest, which not rare, this is not a rare game. And the two notable things about it were, one, it has written badly on it in marker, and I'm just going to read what is written on this cartridge. Fucking mine. You can only fucking borrow this game. And it has a price tag of $1,000 US. So I saw a scary number of people freaking out like, there's no way that game's worth $1,000. And other people trying to rationalize it like, but what if this was a rental-only copy? Because there's a third. Long story short, nobody knows who wrote that text on it. It was probably some kid who lent this game to a friend and made it clear that it's fucking his and he's going to get it back because he's exactly 13 years old. He owns a game called Demon's Crest and he's an edgelord. The story is the game store owner thought this was really funny and just put this $1,000 price tag on it just for a joke and took a picture of it, and that picture is online, and everyone's freaking out about this and all these conversations about it. It's just a joke, guys. And in fact,
because if you don't give the context, then people start, thinking, try to imagine things.
Except the context was trivial to discover by clicking on the tweet and scrolling down in the comments.
Don't do that.
The guy who posted it was like, FYI, here's the entire story, and somehow everybody missed it, and there's even people replying.
See the picture.
Yep.
How many people copied that picture and pasted it somewhere else without, even if people embedded a link to the tweet that doesn't include the whole thread, it just includes the tweet itself,
So if there's probably some kid out there who has a TI 85 calculator where the name Rim and I don't remember what I wrote like property of Rim and some other stuff with a knife on the back of it, and I'm sure
that's probably in a landfill.
TI-85s are pretty good if you replace the batteries. Anyway, what do you got?
So another social platform, right? Reddit, for the April bullshit day, which was a couple weeks ago. They do this thing. They've been doing it for a while now, called Our Place. Which is basically the way it works is they open up a big white canvas. And if you have a Reddit account, you can go to that big white canvas and you can select one pixel and change the color of that pixel. And I think there's like maybe 16 color, 32, not that many colors to choose from. Very small number of colors to choose from. But it's, a full Crayola set, right? You're not going to be like, oh no, there's no red. It's like they got red. It's like, come on. And you set a pixel, and then you think you have to wait 5 or 10 minutes, and then you can set another pixel. Or you can get multiple Reddit accounts and start doing lots of pixels.
Yep.
Right? Or you can get a large subreddit of coordinated people to do a lot of pixels. And of course, you can overwrite other people's pixels, right? It's like, I could put down a black, and Rim can just be like, come right on top and turn it white again. It's like,
this is why you've got to have some amount of community power to do anything interesting here.
Well, Reddit happens to be a social network built around communities, right?
Yeah.
All these different subreddits. So you get all the people of your subreddit together. Now, it doesn't just matter how many people are in your subreddit. It matters how many of them give a shit, how many of them have time for this, right? How many of them care. And you can go and onto this big canvas, you can draw things and sort of claim. So it's sort of a game of claiming territory via social influence, but also, it's a artwork thing, right? Where what do we draw? Where do we draw it? Trying to integrate with the things that are drawing nearby, right? Lots of integration going on. There's just so many dynamics. And at the end, right, when they turn it off, the end result is usually, I don't want to say picture of the internet, but it's basically a picture of the communities of Reddit. And you can see that year at that exact moment, what was big, what was not so big, right?
It's fascinating to dig through this, especially because there's a lot of one-off pixels that are the wrong color because it's a battle.
Yeah. And I'm very pleased that, fuck cars got a really big spot. So that the anti-car movement is growing. You can see that lots of country flags are large, right? Because
Turkey's got a huge one,
pretty large, right?
Turkey did a lot of this. There's multiple whole areas that were done by Turkish Reddit.
Yep.
There's a picture of Ataturk. There's a giant Turkish flag.
The Ataturk at the top. Yeah.
Yep. There's also the Turkish flag with the Istanbul cityscape.
Yep. There's all kinds of stuff on here, and this is only the end picture, but the website that's actually my thing of the day is the Reddit Place Atlas for 2022. And what this is they took the final image, so you don't get to see the evolution of it, which is sad. But they have sort of gone over the image and carved out every single different piece of it and sort of given you a label so you can understand what everything is. Like, it's like you see some guy's face and you're like, what the hell is that? And you hold your mouse over it and it's like,
it's Boris Mancho, a Turkish rock musician.
It's a Total Biscuit tribute. That guy who died. Here's a whole bunch of paragraphs about him.
Oh, I forgot about him.
What's this over here? Oh, it's K-Pop Alley. These are all these different K-pop groups that all put their shit near each other. Right?
Battle of the Heroes, a mural depicting the duel between Obi-Wan Kenobi and Anakin Skywalker.
Right, here's a Star Wars poster. And then even within the Star Wars poster, they're like, this is the Death Star. This is the, you know. So you can learn a lot about the culture of, you know, the people of the internet of, 2022 and Reddit by going over this image and hovering over things and being like, what the hell is, what is that? Why would enough people get together to fight for space to draw that image there and then defend it to the very end, right? Why would they care enough to do that? If there were that many people who put that effort forth, whatever that image is, must have some significance to enough people on this earth that maybe it's worth knowing what the image is and what it stands for. So,
Leah from Crosscode, the main protagonist of the action role-playing game Crosscode, released in 2018 from Austria. The other thing that I think is really striking about it is how extremely non-US centric it is.
Yeah. Those people from those countries have a lot more pride, right? And they there's a lot of other.
I would not be putting a very super pro-America thing on this thing.
This is the American flag's in the bottom right. That's the pro-America stuff.
Yep.
But for example, right? A good example of how like the numbers don't line up, right? The Vancouver Canucks, right? Their logo is somewhere on here, and it's actually pretty significantly large and fancy. And somehow the people of Vancouver, like, they had that thing in there early and they held it like for a long time. It's like, I'm pretty sure it's in the final image, right? Meanwhile, the Rangers, right? We have way more fans. Our subreddit is way bigger, right? And
we're New Yorkers. We don't have time for that shit. I'm not going to go defend my pixel.
The best we could do is, right, we tagged along the Colorado Avalanche, put like a whole, pretty fancy looking full logo there. And we have like a sad looking, like it says Hank 30, like a blurry, like we had to like team up with them to get some space because so few Rangers fans gave a shit, right?
Because remember, this is, like you said,
better things to do.
This is not a representation of the biggest internet communities. It's the most online internet communities.
Well, the most caring about this particular thing on Reddit. Anyway, it's still really fascinating to browse through it and look around it and see what, find
fascinating.
things. See things you recognize, don't recognize, learn about stuff, maybe. And the really useful thing is like, you'll see some image and you're like, I've seen that around. I've seen that. But what is it? You hover over it. Now you know what it is,
Quackity.
And that's
all
nice.
Right. Oh, is that Marx? Okay. Yes, it's Karl Marx. Good job. Okay, anyway, in the meta moment, the GeekNights Book Club book was N.K. Jemisin's The City We Became. We read it. We did a show on it. That book is fantastic. I'm going to read the sequel basically instantly when it comes out. We'll probably talk about it, but it won't be a book club book. Kind of like how I read the entire Wheel of Time. Yep. And I talked about it a little bit.
The next book club selection, the current book club selection, is listener choice, 9 Fox Gambit.
Not 10 foxes, not 8, but 9.
9 foxes. So, listener got their way. I already read the book. Rim's gonna read the book. The listener goes at some point, and then we'll do an episode in a few months, probably.
Yeah, we'll give you time to read it. I feel like I'll read it pretty quick.
I don't forget it all.
There is a chance we will record the episode earlier, like as soon as I finish it. But we'll make
bad idea.
But we'll make sure we don't it's not official. We're not going to put it in the. We might live stream it if we do that, but we won't put it in the feed until you've had enough time to read it, so you can still actually follow along. It is a book club. Not everyone reads entire books over the course of a week like we do.
Yep.
So let's get right into it. There was a tweet that caused us to think of this idea, and the tweet was a an image posted by YouTube Gaming, and it said, "In which era of video cables did you start your gaming journey?" And anyone who is older than like being a tiny child immediately took issue with the fact that it did not cover most of the cables that were used for gaming over the years, and it didn't even have the cables that it showed in the right order.
Yeah, so we've done shows on like monitors and other things of that nature, but we never did a show, I think, on video cables specifically. And video cables are interesting in that they're sort of this unique kind of cable, right? Most other cables, like power cables, it's like they send power. Right?
Yep.
It's like, there are some differences.
I mean,
some have...
I work with, I used to work with, I don't anymore, with DC-driven data centers. So our power cables were giant bars of exposed metal behind glass plates. Do not touch them. That's a power cable.
Yeah, sure. You've also got data cables, which send data, right? But video cables, right, are sending a specific kind of data, and they under very specific circumstances, right? That you're sending data that will represent an image that will be displayed on some sort of monitor of some kind, some display device, projector or something, right? And you need to send not only how many different colors the device can display, but also, enough data so that it can render all the frames that it's going to be sending, and consistently so that the frames are displaying, at even intervals, right? So it's like a video cable is like a unique thing in the world of cables, in that it has completely different requirements from all others. And on top of that, over the years, the devices on both ends of a video cable have changed significantly in how they work, and thus the video cables have had to change significantly to meet the requirements on both ends.
And also, the most fascinating part, the signaling over these cables was analog for a long time. Digital video over cables for anything other than extremely niche or like professional use cases was practically non-existent until pretty recently.
And it seems like a good time to talk about video cables now, because what we're seeing in the present time is USB-C becoming, at least the physical structure of USB-C, regardless of what's going over the cable, might be DisplayPort or Thunderbolt or whatever, right?
It's the cable to rule them all. It's the cable to do literally everything with.
All other cables, including video cables. I think definitely within 5 to 10 years for sure. I think just everything that's going to connect to anything else with any kind of data, whether it's video data or otherwise, is going to be that shape of cable. And any other kind of cable is going to be slowly made obsolete.
Networking will remain, like, that's not going to change. Written out.
I could see a world in which, well, first of all, people are mostly networking wirelessly, right?
Yeah.
So in the data center at the office, probably still going to be Ethernet, right?
Yeah, well, because USB-C has a very short range, remember?
Yes, but I could see a world in which you get a router from your ISP, right, in 2020.
Oh, we've already had that. My router, the router in Beacon, had a USB port on it, and you could plug a computer directly into that USB port.
Those USB-C ports that are on those.
No, that wasn't USB-C. That was regular as USB.
Right,
you could.
Those were for plugging in storage devices that would then become network storage.
There were routers you could directly plug a computer into. I've used them.
But I've never seen that in my life.
I've seen them. I've used them. They were slow as shit because USB direct networking sucked shit.
Well, but the point is, I could very well see ISPs soon giving people routers in their homes that have Wi-Fi and like a single USB-C connection if you really want to connect your device.
I bet they won't. My rationale is anyone who thinks about that is the kind of person who would never use a wired connection anyway.
Well, because I think what you're getting, right? Someone has like a MacBook Pro, right? It's like, why should they go out and buy some USB-C to Ethernet?
Because their router is almost definitely not going to be where their MacBook is, and you can't make a long USB-C cable.
You don't know.
I absolutely know.
You can make some that are.
Nope, you absolutely cannot. The signaling standard.
I I could see very much
Nope.
in the not too distant future, no more Ethernet in people's houses. So
Yes, but I think it's replaced by
for
all.
nerds who have it on purpose.
I think it's replaced by all wireless.
I think there would, it might be replaced by all wireless, but if it's not, I think there might be a USB-C on the back.
I don't think so because nothing in the USB-C physical specification.
You'll see like a cable box that has USB-C to go to the television.
You'll see that. You'll see that easily.
It's all the same, right? You'll just get
No, but it's short range. There is Have you ever read the specs for a physical USB-C cable? There is no provision for long cable
I got one really
lengths.
long one, and it does work.
Really long? How long? Ethernet can go a kilometer.
It's not that long.
Yeah.
We don't need it to go a kilometer, though. Just
Also,
across the living room.
One thing I've seen is a lot of people, and this gets back to that YouTube tweet, because knowledge of old cables is lost, coaxial RF cables, the same cables used for old TV signaling were used for cable modems, and to this day are used, even my Fios. It's Fios into my front, like the front of the apartment, and then there's a device there that has coax that goes through the apartment into the computer room where the router is. A lot of people don't know that those cables are dirt cheap, trivial to run, and they pay a lot of money to get Verizon or something to run that cable for them through their own house.
Anyway, so the oldest video cable, we'll go back to the beginning, right? Because USB
that would be proprietary soldered or twisted on RF cables because video was transferred from any device, like early gaming devices, early everything. They had to connect to existing TVs, and existing TVs were designed to be connected directly to a 300 ohm RF antenna connection.
Exactly. So you had this antenna on your roof, and it was picking up signals from the air from some broadcast antenna wirelessly, and then just like a radio, that signal went into your television, and that was the only input the television had. So what you would end up having to do to send some other thing into your television that wasn't from an antenna is you would basically have to broadcast television, right? Only instead of broadcasting it on an antenna, right, to the whole world, you would broadcast it over a wire. And
which I want to point out,
TV.
That is all cable TV is. The signals going over, like cable TV when it first was introduced, same signals that are going over the air, just on a cable instead of in the air.
Yep, just the exact same broadcast. You could take like a VCR, right? So what is a VCR? It's a magnetic tape, and on the tape, they've recorded the RF signal, and you play it back again just as it was. It's not converting it to other. It's just writing it down and playing the signal back again.
Well, even worse,
cassette tape records FM on,
it's encoded in this complicated spiral slant way because there isn't enough bandwidth on a VCR tape, a VHS tape. But anyway, I digress.
You could, if you could take a VCR with the VHS tape, right? And if you had a big enough antenna and a big enough amplifier, you could broadcast directly over the air, and some old TV with an antenna could then watch the videotape you were playing. Right? That would totally work. So an old Atari or an old Nintendo, right, would just create TV signals. You could hook up an NES or an Atari 2600 to a giant antenna, and the whole world would be watching Combat, right? or Pac-Man, right? You could do it. And then you would connect it to the back of the TV where the antenna goes. And usually it was in the form of these two prongs because the antenna is always connected with these little forks, right? You would put the screw in the middle of the forks, right?
So the funny thing is, I needed a picture of that, and I discovered something terrifying. By and large, the internet doesn't even know that the twin lead RF existed. I found, when I Googled for it.
That's how old we are.
Nobody knows what it's called. And I found mostly people posting questions asking, what the fuck are these two screw things in the back of this old TV? What do they do? What's this called? What can I plug into it? Nobody knows. But it's twin lead RF or 300 ohm RF designed to be plugged in directly to an antenna. The coax cables that come out of cable boxes or cable TV, that is RF. But it's
exactly the same as the two forks.
But it's 75 ohm. There's multiple differences. You actually have to convert that signal if you want to plug it into a TV that does not have a coaxial input. It came way later.
Yep. But yeah, so you had that. And then what you would have to do with those, that was a lot of fun back in the day, is it's like, well, I want to plug my Atari into my TV.
Yep.
But I also want to plug the TV into the antenna still. I still want to watch TV sometimes. So you would have an RF switch, and you would go behind your TV and flick the switch.
Yep.
And you would plug the antenna into the switch and the Atari into the switch, and then the switch into the TV, and you would switch between the two, just like an HDMI switch nowadays.
And that switch, it would basically, the Atari would send its RF signal through that box on the frequency that happened to be US channel 3, but it was different frequencies in other countries.
Right, so you had to turn, in the United States, you'd have to turn your TV to channel 3 to watch what was being broadcast by the Atari.
When I was a kid, the two greatest mysteries in my life were why channel 3 and why isn't there a channel 1? Because there wasn't an internet to look that up on.
And, only now, literally this moment, I realized, what they could have done if they had a more powerful, right, Atari back in the day. You could have broadcast different parts of the game on different channels. And you could have had the Atari sending out, data on like 7 channels, and you flip between them. Like channel 2 is the map, channel 3 is the, right? They could have done that if they had enough power.
There's lots of nonsense you could have done, but pretty much
no one did that ever.
But in terms of video cables that consumers used in their own homes, twin lead RF was it for most of the history of video existing in homes.
Yep, the coax RF came around when cable TV became a thing.
Yep.
And they still had switches for those, but the switches were like the NES came with like an automatic switch. You didn't have to go back and flick it yourself.
Yep.
It's like if you turn
it was this gray box.
Right, it automatically detected when you turn the NES on and then would turn off the TV antenna. And then when you turn the NES off, the TV would come back.
But also that NES device, I want to say it only took in 75 ohm. So if you had an old 300 ohm antenna, you still needed some sort of conversion.
Yeah, if you had the twin lead, you needed a special extra thing.
Yep. That TV we had up until Beacon had twin lead on the back.
So Atari was twin lead, NES was coax, but also the NES did have, and the Famicom didn't have it.
Yep.
But the NES actually had one advantage over the Famicom in that it did have component RCA. It didn't have stereo sound. It just had a red and a yellow and a white, or a red and white, whatever. Yellow, and it just had one video and one audio, and that was it. But if you had a TV that took RCA in, that was definitely preferred to use that.
But TVs that could take RCA in were extremely rare.
For until the later 90s, at least, right? Mid to late 90s, I'd say.
Yep.
I didn't really see too many.
Now, this is where it starts to get a little complicated because what signal is going over a cable is not necessarily like one-to-one related to what kind of cable you're using. And it gets more and more complex into the future. But RCA is what most people call it. Some people call it component RCA, but a lot of people who call it that think that that is component, which is a totally different.
Is different.
And also component was rarely used by any consumer except nerds, and it only was really popular for a very brief period of time.
Though it's the best option if you have a Wii.
If you have a Wii or like a GameCube, that is the best possible. Oh my God. It was so much better than using RCA. But RCA basically became the de facto standard for video for a long time in the US. And it was a standard that included video and audio, which was made it easy. But the signaling over that thing, it wasn't RF. It was something completely different. And this is where
I never fully understood how it worked.
It just sent two components, basically.
Yeah. But the main significant difference for the RCA over the RF, right, was that, number one, it was much easier to figure out how to set it up, right?
Yep, because they had
switches.
There were standardized colors, yellow, red, and white.
Yeah. Now, the video was separated from the audio. So now you could send the video to the television and the audio to a receiver separately without having to have the TV get involved. And you could now suddenly hook up sound systems and things to your television more easily with RCA. Also, you didn't need this external switching thing to go behind the TV or whatever, because now your TV could just have like 5 sets of RCA inputs, and this is when the first TVs, instead of turning to channel 3 or something, you would just push the input button on your remote control. TVs didn't have the input button before RCA, really.
Yeah, and in fact, a lot of TVs, they had a big switch to flip between VHF and UHF.
Yeah, but now once you had RCA, it's like, okay, now the TV has an input button, and one of the inputs is the antenna, which could be cable TV or could be an antenna, but then there'll be other inputs, which are the RCA inputs. So now your VCR, eventually DVD players, when they came out, right, all video game consoles for a long time, all used RCA as the way to plug into the television.
But
even up to GameCubes, PlayStations, right?
now RCA is an ancient standard that predates any of this. It just wasn't used in a lot of consumer technology. It was used heavily in audio, but not commonly used in video until way later. But the other important thing,
plenty of audio devices I've seen that just like, I have cables that go from like, headphone size to just red and white.
Yeah, I still use it for a bunch of stuff. It's unbalanced. Like, it's not the best way to send audio, but it works.
And it was the most friendly. You didn't need a screwdriver. You didn't need to know what the hell's going on.
Oh, you want to know, like my stalagmites might hang from the ceiling, but they don't, Mnemonic. I have an equally terrible one.
Red is on the right side.
Right.
White is on the left side.
Right is red and left is white.
Yeah.
That's how I used to remember it.
Yeah.
And I want to say it correctly. I might be wrong. It's been a long time because the official rule is if you only plug in the white one, then the device is supposed to assume you're sending an analog signal and send that audio to both speakers, but nothing modern does that.
Mono,
yes. It's supposed to assume it's mono and send it to both speakers, but I don't think any modern device does that. But the other problem is RCA is just
the cable. From all the way from like the NES and even the Commodore 64. I remember the Commodore 64 monitor had RCA on the front of it as the way to plug your Commodore into it, right?
Oh, there were devices that used RCA connectors, but they sent RF signals over them. This is where RCA gets complicated. RCA is just a cable specification. There's lots of different ways to use those connectors. So if you heard about Component with the 3 different colored things, I think it's like green, blue, and red.
Yet.
Yeah, but that's RCA. That's also RCA. It's in the same specification.
Yep. Anyway, so that was the way to plug things into a TV from, Commodore 64 up through, PS2 still used it, right? I guess until, HD was a thing.
My TV still has a yellow, white, and red in the back, and also another white and red for audio in the back.
Yeah.
My TV's pretty old.
So, while during that long period where RCA was the thing for televisions, computers had all kinds of different shit going on, right?
Yep.
So all these old computers had all kinds of different weird things that they used. You had the Apple computers all had like RGB cables and all kinds of weird things going on. PCs had VGA cables, then they had DVI cables.
Yep.
Right, they had the S-video cable. The S-video cable is really weird.
S-video, when I first encountered it, I thought, "Wow, that's amazing." Is it just a better cable? And then I discovered rapidly that almost nothing supported it. By the time it was widely available, it was already obsolete, and now it's gone.
Yep. So S-video was it was interesting though, in that there was enough deployment of it that you could use it. Like TVs had an S-video in for the most part during that time period.
Well, during that period, TVs had it, but no devices had it. No VCR had it.
There were devices that had it.
Oh, well,
I had video cards that had it.
Almost every device that had it was either a camcorder. That's the place I saw it the most.
Yeah, that's right.
Yep. And a handful of video cards.
I think there were some game consoles too where it was possible to
I don't know if a game console ever had S-video.
Had one, maybe, I want to say. I'm not 100% sure.
I'm actually unaware of any game console that had S-video.
I think there were some that you could have S-video. But regardless, it was all S-video was sort of it never got fully adopted, I think, because even if it was deployed somewhat significantly, it was never alone, right? You were never in a situation where like that was what you had to use. Because like if a device had an S-video out, it had another video out besides S-video. If a TV had an S-video in, it had plenty of RCA ins and other ins. So you were never in a situation where like S-video was the one you were gonna use. And it wasn't. I don't know if it was different or not, but it definitely wasn't significant.
Yeah, that's what I was going to get to. So S-video is one cable, but all it sends is luma and chroma The same fucking Luma and Chroma that we send over that yellow cable in RCA. It just has more grounding. Like it's better designed, but it's not better.
Yep. Okay. So all those computer cables, right? The VGAs and DVIs, right? Those were basically like, breaking things down into tons of, separation, right?
Yep.
A bunch of little wires all on separate pins, right?
But also, that's also where we started to move to digital signaling because VGA was analog signaling still.
Yep, still. But there was VGA still has a digital signal for like the VSync, right?
Yep.
Some of those pins, because that's the one difference with a computer versus a television, right? The television, like what the frame rate is on the television, at least in those days, right? It was locked in. Whereas with computers, right, your vertical refresh rate could be anything, and your resolution could be different as well. So a lot of those pins on VGI and DVA were to synchronize the clocks.
You said VGI and DVA.
VGA, DVI, whatever, yeah. But a lot of those pins were there to synchronize the clock so you could get the frame rate and resolution correct, right?
Yep.
The horizontal sync.
But all the data was just pure analog RGB HV, which was literally red, green, blue, horizontal sync, vertical sync. And all the other pins are just in support of those.
Yep.
There's also some data pins
power pins.
And there were some data pins that I don't think were ever used by anything ever.
We had a recent thing of the day, Ben Eater. He has a video where he shows you how to basically make a VGA display video card, right? It's world's worst. It calls the video like world's worst video card or something. And if you watch that video, you'll understand how VGA works.
Yep. But VGA, for all these pins, it's not really that different from component, which used RCA, but instead of having one for video, one for left channel, one for right channel, it had 3 video pins. And VGA actually very similarly just has 3 video pins for the 3 colors.
But due to the vertical and horizontal syncs being in there, it supported a wide variety of resolutions and frame rates that the other cables couldn't do.
And VGA was the standard for computers for a long time, and DVI didn't actually replace it. It just coexisted alongside it because it added some things, but it also wasn't super universally adopted. And it starts to get complicated.
DVI did have some other features but like those features never really got used. I don't know if you could do...
Well, DVI, you could run VGA signaling over some of the pins on DVI. You could have analog and digital signals coexisting on DVI. You could drive 2 monitors from the same DVI cable, and very little of this was ever used. DVI was kind of over-engineered and ahead of its time.
And then HDMI came.
Yep.
So.
And HDMI rapidly became, I'm basically from HDMI onward, we are at the basically pure digital signaling. These are just digital cables. Doesn't really matter to the consumer anymore.
HD realm, it's like, okay, that's the end of all those other things, right? Everyone has an LCD panel, right? That's HD at least. So we can all use HDMI now, right?
Yeah. Well, so there are 2. There's HDMI and DisplayPort are basically the 2 right now. And most video cards...
DisplayPort is really only used by computers.
Yep. So most computer, like we just got a 3080 Ti, right? It's got 3 DisplayPorts and 1 HDMI. That's kind of the default right now.
Yep. That's just about any video card's going to have that these days.
And at this point,
if you get, even the thing is, DisplayPort, right, is there even if you don't realize it's there. At the start of the show, we talked about USB-C.
Yeah.
Like, but USB-C is just DisplayPort only on a different shape.
And to a degree, DisplayPort is just USB-C because this is where we have completely disentangled the physical spec of the cable from what the fuck you're doing over it. And DisplayPort and USB-C as cables can both do basically anything.
Yeah, pretty much.
DisplayPort has the added bonus of it can ruin your computer.
Well, only in that one weird case that's largely solved now, pretty much.
Yeah, largely solved because devices had to protect themselves from the fact that most of the cables are still broken to this day. I encountered a broken cable recently. They're out there still.
Sure. Something else is that, these cables, since they can do just about anything, right, we're seeing them do more things at once, right? But much like DVI, we're not seeing those things really used thoroughly. So like DisplayPort, you can daisy chain DisplayPort. You can go from your computer to a monitor, and then from that monitor to a second monitor with 2 DisplayPort cables, and that's supposed to work. but it only works if everything is super great and it supports things properly.
Yep,
And
yep.
a lot of times it doesn't, and it's not, it's like, come on, just make it work, people, right? You could theoretically put like networking. I have HDMI cables that are ultra thick. I got rid of it though, but I had one that was Ethernet over HDMI. So you could theoretically get a monitor or a TV and plug it in to a device, and then that device could provide the TV. Let's say it was a smart TV because you were a fool and you were going to use it. You could let the smart TV get its internet over the HDMI cable. It's like, have I ever seen that working? The only time that's probably ever worked is in like some commercial setting, right? Where they have networked panels for displaying things like an airport or some shit like that.
Yeah.
Or advertising displays or something. I don't think it's ever going to work in anyone's house.
Yeah.
I get there are ways, I think, of sending power over certain HDMI cables. I've never seen that work, if that exists. I think I've seen it. I think I've seen it like mentioned, but I've never seen it working in person, right? But that would be cool because you could have a display with no power cable, just one cable, the end. That would be nice.
Yep, I think we'll get there. I think we'll see you just plug your computer into your monitor via a USB-C cable and everything just works.
Yep, that'd be good.
Or a cable or some future cable, USB-D.
Are we going to see another cable after USB-C at any point?
Yeah, well, most of the research right now is around doing increasingly complex things over the existing physical cable standards. So the physical cables are evolving, but also reaching sort of upper limits of what you can do with them without like novel materials. And it's the signaling standards and the specifications of how they're used, the auto negotiation between devices. Like in the old days, if you used USB-A, there was a way to send video over that and do sorts of nonsense. But
weak, though.
Yeah, also cables, think about old computer cables, even old video cables, really easy to break stuff and cause problems, or things just don't work, or the negotiation, you plug a newer device into an older device, the auto negotiation fails and everything breaks. We're getting to the point to where any modern device can just plug a USB-C cable into any other modern device, and they'll figure out what they can even do with each other. I've
been reading a lot of articles from people who are like, really sticklers for specifications. And
I used to be.
They're all complaining like, oh, USB-C is a mess. Everything's wrong.
It's less of a mess than DisplayPort or HDMI.
Right. They're like, this doesn't work with that. The Mac says it supports this, but it doesn't. Right. And I'm like, and they're showing like these weird edge cases.
Yeah.
And I'm like,
oh, you're trying to do FireWire over USB-C. Who cares about that but you? Right. I clearly don't.
Right. It's like, let's talk about real practical examples, right? Here's a real practical example. I can go and buy a generic USB-C device that on one end has USB-C cable and on the other end has an HDMI output and an SD card reader. And I can plug that one generic device into a MacBook, right? My PC and the bottom of a Nintendo Switch. And on all three of those devices, and a phone, an Android phone, or an iPad also. Right? 5 different devices that have USB-C holes. I can plug that same generic thing into all 5 devices, and in all 5 of them, the HDMI port will work, and the SD card reader will work.
Yep.
Right? So, practically speaking, in terms of, an everyday person, right? I don't give a shit if there's like these spec problems that some people are complaining about where this device doesn't work with that one or that person.
Yep. People like that are how you get USB OTG. Like, rest in peace.
Right, it's like it works enough that it's a miracle for people's lives that they can buy one adapter and use it with every fucking thing they own and don't have to buy a second one, and it works properly.
Yeah.
So that's what counts.
All right, we went on
RF cable.
I think that was a fine show, and we went plenty long.
Okay.
All right, I'm desperately hungry. I'm just going to drop and upload the show later.